Anyways, the on to part three now. The patriarchal form of balance creates a sense of tunnel vision, is what I'm kind of trying to get to. This idea that everything that was really relevant and important to a person's life has to be thought of in relation to what another force could do to them or another. And this is not something that humanity is just going to magically find its way out of. We've been there's been too much of this going on for too long. So obviously we're not living in balance with nature, because if we were, then why are all of these species dying off at greater rates than they should? Why is our planet becoming uninhabitable? Why is it that our activities are making things worse? Like, for example, the amount of human beings who burn down forests, homes, who destroy their own environment, who pollute shit. And this kind of goes back to the notion, the idea that, when I said at the beginning, I mentioned the two guys fighting, right? And not seeing about the consequences of their conflict. Well, one of the consequences, actually, global warming, in my view, I don't disconnect it from the existing, system. I view it as a direct consequence of it, because if people could trust each other, if they weren't so afraid, sometimes for good reasons, then they could all unite and become one people and then develop some kind of consistent solution to this problem. But because of the existence of fear, because of everybody's track records, because of things that people have learned in the past about what happens when you try to engage in peaceful relations while the other person doesn't. We have seen as people that, especially these systems, it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario that most people will find themselves into. It's like, yeah, I would love peace, but at the same time, their weapons are pointed towards me. They could kill me. So what's a fella to do? What's a guy to do? That is the kind of trap that the patriarchal systems have established and set up for humanity. We're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't. And this is actually something that can manifest itself in other ways, on the personal level, on an interpersonal level, not even just a national level. But you can see this in the life of people who have lived through violence, where it's not so easy just to get away, to escape, or to try to resolve these issues that are continuing to the present day. So I've pretty much explained the danger of this form of balance, but what is the Gynarchic form of balance? To understand what makes Gynarchic balance different from patriarchal balance is Gynarchic balance isn't even about like trying to balance a pen or whatever. It's about trying to do this. It's about trying to create something that is similar to static, actually not even static, but more like dynamic equilibrium. Dynamic equilibrium, for those who don't know, it's like when something is in constant motion, but it's neither speeding up or slowing down. So it's kind of like this. So and that's the best way to explain it. What Gynarchists, at least as a Gynarchist, what I can tell you what I would like, although what may not be possible, is to achieve our own variant of dynamic equilibrium, where we continue to move forward and make progress, but we also continue to stay in balance. And by the way, the difference between this and the other is that Gynarchic balance is related to fabric brains. It's related to the idea of a person being in concert with everything around them. Being in concert with not only yourself, your family, but also with your neighbors, like actually knowing what they're like, knowing what their sensibilities are, thinking about how your actions affect them first before thinking about yourself. Because usually patriarchal stuff, their idea of balance, it usually relates back to selfish desires, like a guy wanting to beat up another country. Why? Because they want to be better, right? It's a competition. We're better than they are. It's selfish. It's usually short-sighted. It's a form of tunnel vision that people sometimes engage in and make their way through life, and they're not seeing all the harm they're causing. Gynarchic balance is not about just balancing out affairs between human beings. It's about balancing things out in a way to where we are living in peaceful coexistence with not only ourselves but with nature itself, with other aspects of nature. We are nature, but we're not the only part of it. And the thing that human beings have done is we've disconnected ourselves from other parts of nature. And this disconnection has been only growing worse. And what Gynarchic balance is, I think, really about is it's reestablishing that connection to to our actions, to all of the consequences of those actions, and to try to live responsibly with the power that we do have, but also eventually to set up a philosophy and an idea that will replace these existing systems with ones that do not use violence as a solution to problems. In fact, it could very well be said, in fact, there are other guys who say that we do need a one world Gynarchic government, that it's not enough to have a one world patriarchal one. And the reason for that is because it'll just end up being helmed by a male dictator who will just squash all dissent, like all dictators have done, which is not good for people, obviously. But where the Gynarchic point of view comes in, and where Gynarchy starts to manifest itself in this discussion, is that if we look at what these people do, right? What do men do versus what women do? And this is the reason, and this is going to get a little philosophical, but part of I truly believe, in my view on what caused this imbalance, it was actually the disrespect of nature that was that was given and propped up by Abrahamic religions. In other words, the idea that this earth is just a place that we've been condemned to. We've been condemned to, in other words, we've been condemned to die, to suffer, blah, blah, blah. And that there is no meaning in any of it unless we consign ourselves to that which is beyond it. So if you take a very close look at these belief systems, there seems to be an underlying hatred of mortality rather than an acceptance of it. There's almost a rejection of the natural. You actually, because death is a natural part of life. You see that in these belief systems, there's always the rejection of not only nature, but the idea that you don't come from the planet, you come from a being that exists outside of space and time or some other bullshit like that. You're not actually from here. You're from somewhere else, or your people are from somewhere else. So we see that the rejection against nature began very early, over 2,000 years ago, and that this rejection of nature only became something that then it became, where men started doing other things too, where it's not just rejecting nature, it's not actually putting people who are more appropriate to positions of leadership in there so that those leaders can best benefit their people. So, for example, instead of putting a wise, peaceful woman in a position of leadership, instead you put a violent guy in there, or a violent personality disordered person. Did that thing just go? That's weird. I heard a noise or something. Anyways, getting back to what I was saying, to me, the form of imbalance began right there, because women are often they're often, I think, the most representative of this truth, that just like how they are where we come from, most of us, obviously, or no, where human beings come from. You have Gaia, which is the planet, the mother Gaia, that is where we're from. And it's interesting how disconnect from nature is actually connected with misogyny against women and girls. That these two are not disconnected; they're actually the same. And so, when you have a disrespect for nature, you're going to have a disrespect for and a contempt for women and girls. And the reason why is because they are the most visible reminder to men and to boys that actually you didn't come from whatever the fuck it is. You came from your mother. You came from her. She, nurtured you, and then just like the planet nurtured your species and created you. And what they did was they engaged in not only lies and deceit, but in order to take advantage of certain vulnerabilities that people had, like their ego, their idea that, oh, no, 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 there must be something afterwards, the idea that they're more important than everything around them, right? That they are above that which that they are part of. I mean, really, it is a sickness when you think about it. And I view it as a male sickness, and a narcopathic and personality disordered sickness that is sort of, it's kind of, been part of the human. If I don't remember what it's called in biology, but it's kind of become part of the human system. It's infected humanity, and what the Gynarchic, I think, form of balance is it's addressing and trying to reconnect with the planet, trying to acknowledge that there are basic realities between men and women, that women are more peaceful, that they have certain qualities that make them make that will naturally work in the favor of leadership. Now, I do think that there are some ways that society would have to be organized to where they could enforce it, but how you enforce it is what's important. You shouldn't be shooting people or killing people just because they disagree with you. It's ridiculous. Instead, the Gynarchic view of balance, especially one way I would look at it, would be to where if there is force, it's only used in the sense of, like, if you have a community-based level, right, where if there's somebody causing a problem, you try to use something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You don't pull out a gun if you can help it, and if you have to, you try to injure. The idea is the value on life, the kind of getting away from this destructive element as much as possible. And I do believe in the future there will be the collapse of state governments and nations. And so there's going to be communities, communities that are going to be surviving are the ones who embrace the Gynarchic view of balance, which is before we consider what we want to do, what I want to do, we have to think about all of these different pieces and all of these different elements first, and how our actions or what we're doing leads to all of this. Because generally speaking, we don't. A lot of us are caught up in the moment, caught up in the heat of the moment, caught up in what's going on to actually see the harm that's being done. And ultimately, what I believe is that part of the inevitable part of Gynarchic balance is the complete cessation of international conflict. In other words, the end of war itself, the end of war as a solution to human beings' problems. And I don't think that that will come merely by dismantling militaries. I think that that will come when all of the nations and states are done. In other words, when they have been destroyed by their own decision making and by sustaining the cycle of violence, destruction, abuse, and resentment, and so on. And that afterwards, when we do reestablish balance, it is important that, especially if we're some of the only people left, to realize that it's actually it's this notion that using war, that using violence as the means by which to gain more resources or to gain more power, that this is all connected to the actual disconnect that goes back over 2,000 years, and that this is where this has led us. And so once Gynarchists have established these communities, and once they are all one, in other words, once humanity is all one again, not divided, then it becomes a matter of finding more healthy means of dealing with internal conflicts rather than externalizing them and making it everybody else's problem for whatever it is that they're going through, or establishing militaries, or using these, or trying to feed into machines that create weapons of ever greater destruction, or greater destructive capacity, not destruction. So the ultimate, the ideal form of Gynarchic balance is no more wars, no militaries, no police forces, none of this shit. It's where human beings would be living in concert with each other, in balance, not only with themselves, but with nature. That is the Gynarchic view of balance. It doesn't mean the end of conflict, as some would suggest, or utopia. That's bullshit. There's still mortality. There's still going to be, things about nature that are destructive. There's still going to be people who will have to be reined in. It's just not using or justifying the existence of these organizations to do that. That's it. So if you do that, then it's just a slippery slope to disaster, which is what it has been. And you're never going to dismantle these militaries. Just forget about it. They have to basically, these nations have to collapse in order for there to be true change, because you're not going to be able to tell people who have superior military might or whatever to be like, yeah, maybe we should all just lay our guns down and kind of go home and take care of our families. No, they're not going to do that. What they're going to do instead is they're going to stubbornly hold on to their power until nature kind of walks up to them and says, you've been doing this disconnect thing with me for over 2,000 years, and I just wanted to remind you that you're part of me. You're not separate from me, and you're not above the consequences of what you do. And it's that moment when human beings will have to decide, do I want to continue down this path, or do I want to return back to what it should be, which is balance with nature. And the only, in terms of the Gynarchic thing, it's that because women are more peaceful and are more likely to use or express their aggression in a way that is non-volatile, non-aggressive, if the women have the authority or the ability to rein in these tendencies of men, depending on how you organize and structure it, then you put an end to the externalization of this violence, and then it becomes internal conflict, which is what I believe the future will be eventually, where people will stop doing this shit, look inside and ask themselves, what do I want with my life, and what are my problems? So it's like Gynarchy is not the end of human problems or the end of human conflict. It's the end of external conflict. It's the end of somebody picking up a gun and shooting a bunch of people. That's what it really is. That's what I mean by Gynarchic balance. It's where we are responsible enough to acknowledge that because of these sex-based differences, because women are so different from men, that if they just had the authority and ability to hold men in reserve, in other words, to contain and control their violence and their destructive tendencies, that you would then see balance. Because the idea, right, is if one guy is attacking another guy, eventually, right, somebody else will come in and it'll just start it over again, so they're just attacking each other. But if one woman is controlling one guy and another woman is controlling one guy, as long as those two women, as long as you set up a system to where the vast majority of the men who would otherwise be out there could be violent can't, because the women are controlling them and they're containing the violence, then you start to see that eventually violence dies out. People, are not able to act on what they want or able to do it. My viewpoint is that if men can do it, they will do it. So taking away their ability to do it in the future, or hopefully I would rather prefer, it depends, because if there's some mass destructive event, that may be necessary, but if not, then at the very least, it's kind of like this. If the men who survive surrender their privileges to the women, and then you have a society where the women have the control and balance, then they can sort of rein the guys in. They can, do the reform, restructuring, and then whenever there is a problem, they just say, no, you're not gonna do that. No punching, kicking, unless it's legal and it's in a ring or whatever. You're not. In other words, giving women more control and power actually on an individual basis will lead to less violence, less problems, and then eventually on the macro level, it leads to more peaceful relations between human beings. It does require that. And the reason why it does is because men, if left to their own devices, will continue to engage in violent acts of destruction. This is reflected by FBI statistics. This is reflected by the amount of wars that men started in the past 129 years alone. This is reflected in the way they can even condition women to be like them. Like they talked about those European queens. Those are women who were conditioned by men to be like men. That's terrifying. But that's how it is. You have to have women in control of the society, not a woman, in order to bring back the balance. So in other words, what I'm really trying to say is men initiate the vast majority of the violence. So how do you cancel that shit out? You have to have an opposing force, but in this case, it's opposing peaceful force. So if a man who would otherwise be violent is under the control of a woman, and she has the means by which to stop him, like a good example of this is Inuyasha, where Kagome, there's I think it was, I might as well just keep going, because I'll just keep holding. Kagome was somebody who she would yell the word "sit," and then Inuyasha would go like that, and he would have no choice but to fall down. And so it's kind of a similar thing there, where if you have the ability, you have the resource tools, but you also have the ability to stop a man before he is engaging in an act of violence, and in fact to use a non-violent form of force to basically stop him, then that's it. The cancels out, right? So it's kind of like if I punch and then I'm holding with my hand, right? The hand will absorb the force of the punch. Well, if you imagine that the man is the hand and the woman, and the resources and with the ability is the hand, that's what it is. So now they're no longer moving. So there's no actual instance of serious deadly violence taking place. Now, there's obviously flaws. There's ways to improve upon these systems, which is why I and a few others developed benevolent Gynarchy, which is an answer to some of the flaws of Gynarchy itself, and to sort of build a better system to help maintain the balance, or as we call it, the Gynarchic balance. I hope that this has been helpful and this has illustrated the difference between these two. Basically, it's not a blind form or a balance or a tunnel vision form of balance. It's a balance that is willing to incorporate many things, not just the violent aspects of our nature, but also what those violent aspects enable. Anyways, thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great day.